Welcome to this edition of World Business Commentary. My name is Belinda Boggs and my co-host is Kristen Ciccarello. Today's edition of our show is about all the recent news about the BRICS nations and their attempt to replace the US dollar. There are a lot of news stories about BRICS and several interesting quotes. Today we are going to talk about this idea. Which countries make up the BRICS bloc, and are they going to replace the dollar? Kristen, can you give us a little background on the BRICS nations? Who are they, and why do they want to replace the dollar?
Sure. The so-called BRICS nations include Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Here's a brief quote from Wikipedia that I think is relevant. Quote, "Since 2009, the BRICS nations have increasingly formed into a more cohesive geopolitical bloc, with their governments meeting annually at formal summits and coordinating multilateral policies. China hosted the most recent 14th BRICS summit on July 24, 2022. Bilateral relations among the BRICS are conducted mainly on the basis of non-interference, equality, and mutual benefit." Unquote. Together, these nations make up about 26.7% of the world's land surface and 41.5% of the global population. This makes sense since they include the top two most populous nations, China and India.
Thanks. Now that we understand who they are, can you explain why they want to replace the dollar?
Certainly. Let's start with a fun little quote from the President of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. First quote from the Financial Times. Quote, "Why can't we do trade based on our own currencies? Who was it that decided that the dollar was the currency after the disappearance of the gold standard?" Unquote. So, he's basically saying, why should the dollar be the world's reserve currency? Why is the US so special? Let's look at one more quote. This time, he was speaking at the New Development Bank of Shanghai. Quote, "Why can't a bank like that of the BRICS have a currency to finance trade relations between Brazil and China, between Brazil and other countries? It's difficult because we are unaccustomed to the idea. Everyone depends on just one currency." Unquote. Here, he is saying that the only reason we are using the US dollar is because we are used to it. We can just change to another currency. No problem, right? Well, we need to examine this. Is it that easy? By the way, for you out there watching on YouTube, if you like what you've heard so far, please subscribe to our channel and give us a big thumbs up.
Great. Thanks for getting us started with those quotes. Now, why would these nations want to get away from using the US dollar?
Great question. There are a few key reasons. Let's start with Russia. Russia has been hurt by US sanctions because of the ongoing war with Ukraine. Because of the US dollar's dominance, these sanctions can actually have an effect on the war without firing a shot. This is one very important tool in America's toolbox to stop aggression around the world. If the US dollar were no longer dominant, such sanctions wouldn't be very powerful, and this would weaken the position of the United States. Russia would absolutely love this.
Okay, great. That makes sense since Russia is an adversary of the United States. But, why Brazil? Why India?
I believe the primary reason, driven by Russia and China, is to try to reduce American influence in the world. You have heard of Pax Americana? This is a term that is based on the Roman Empire's Pax Romana, or Roman peace. For today's world, it means that, since World War II, we have had relative peace, no major world wars. The reason for this is that the United States has a lot of control and influence. Not only do they have the most powerful and best-funded military force on the planet, they have great influence over finances and trade. As for the other nations, let's take India. Here's a quote from the Times of India regarding using the rupee for trade instead of the dollar. Quote, "Increased trade and investment opportunities will result from the rupee's internationalization as India's economy becomes more integrated with the world economy. Additionally, It would increase the rupee's predictability and stability, which makes it a more appealing choice for international investors and central banks seeking to diversify their holdings. Unquote.
So, the keys to understanding why include the following. 1. Adversaries like Russia and China would like the US to have less power and influence and would like to increase their own power and influence. And 2. Countries like India and Brazil would like to make their own currencies stronger and get more investment into their own nations as a result. Since we understand the who, and we understand the why, let's talk about if this is possible. What do you think?
Great question. Let's answer our friend, the president of Brazil's question. What's so great about the dollar? The reserve status of the US dollar is based largely on the size and strength of the US economy and the dominance of the US financial markets. Despite large deficit spending, US Treasury securities remain the safest way to store money. The trust and confidence that the world has in the ability of the United States to pay its debts keep the dollar as the most redeemable currency for facilitating world commerce.
That's interesting. So, what do you think? Can the BRICS destroy that trust?
Let's take a quote from a Business Insider article from April 2023. Quote, "Though it's been floated that such changes imply an important shift in the currency regime, a number of analysts have found the so-called de-dollarization of global trade highly improbable. While the dollar may weaken as the world's go-to currency, there are no likely alternatives that would be able to completely replace it. Even the Chinese yuan, whose role in trade finance has more than doubled since the Ukraine war, is a poor contender. Not only is it virtually pegged to the dollar, China's tight control of it keeps it from adhering to free market flows. The prospect of Brazilians casting the dollar off in the near future is also unlikely," Financial Times reported, as the currency holds a crucial role in commodity markets and industries that Brazil is heavily involved in. End of quote.
So, it doesn't look like it's going to happen? Do you really think the dollar will remain strong in the face of such pressure?
I think people are misunderstanding the situation. Neither China nor Russia nor the BRICS bloc at the present time can change the dollar's status. What would change the dollar's status would have to be something within the US that would cause most of the world to lose its faith in the United States' ability to make good on its obligations. Then, another nation would become more trustworthy. We're nowhere near that. But, it makes a good news story, and I'm happy to discuss it. So, could the dollar lose its dominance? Sure. But, I wouldn't bet on it.
Great analysis. To summarize, the US dollar continues to be the world's reserve currency and the currency of choice for global transactions, because of the world's faith in the US, its economy, and its financial markets. This is unlikely to change soon, despite the fascinating thoughts emanating from the brain of the Brazilian president or Russia's desire to fund its war against Ukraine. So, the dollar remains the undisputed king of currencies. That's our segment for today. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe and like this video if you enjoyed it.